That sounds good.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. We are just bringing in folks from the waiting room, so bear with us one moment while we get everyone into the webinar.
And you'll be there.
Just kind of like get calm, find solutions, and work with him to like figure something.
All right, we're just admitting a few more folks. I'm going to turn over admitting privileges to some of our co-hosts because it is now 2 past the hour. We can go ahead and get started. Welcome to the webinar on EMODs, environmental modifications. My name is Jordan Grant, and I'm the Policy Unit Manager for the Division of Senior and Disability Services. With me here today is the Director of Senior and Disability Services, Tony Newman.
Thanks, Jordan. Yes, I am Tony Newman, and I'm coming to you today from windy Juneau, and I want to thank all of you that are on the line today for joining. A couple of interesting things are happening or have happened recently with regard to environmental modifications, and we wanted to both share them with you and also get your feedback on the environmental modification programs being offered by the state. Making improvements to the environmental modifications offerings here at SDS has been something I've wanted to do almost from the day I started here, and so I'm really pleased that we'll be able to tell you some interesting and exciting things. Next slide, Ellen. Ellen, there we go. All right, thanks. All right, so after I talk for a few minutes, Eric Peterson, who manages our grants unit, will talk about some changes afoot in the grant world with regard to environmental modifications, or we're going to call them EMODs a lot during the course of this presentation. Then Summer Wheeler of our Provider Certification and Compliance Unit will share some news about a unique funding opportunity that will be coming out very soon. And then Jordan, who manages our Policy and Program Development Unit, will finish up by facilitating some conversation about the environmental modifications waiver regulations. And during that time in particular is when we'd really like to hear from you. So it's an assembly of some SDS superheroes. It's kind of like an Avengers movie. Certainly, it'll be as exciting and action-packed, and so we'll hope you'll stick with us for the next hour and a half or so. Jordan, I will punt it back to you for some housekeeping.
Thanks, Tony. And if we can move to, oh, perfect. So this meeting is being recorded. So we ask that you please do not share any personal information, protected health information, anything like that in the chat or spoken. And because this will also be posted on the SDS Policy Unit YouTube page. We also ask that you mute your line if you are not speaking. There will definitely be an opportunity for questions at the end of the presentation and throughout. And we ask that you please use the raise your hand feature located on the kind of the bottom bar of Zoom. I'll give you a little bit more instruction on that, or you can type your question into the chat. Again, we are looking for feedback and discussion, so we are eager to hear your thoughts, and we'll be pausing after each topic to gather some information and gather some questions. And then at the end, we will also pause for questions as well. So I know many of you are very familiar with Zoom, but just in case, if you are joining online, you will see there's a black bar at the bottom of your Zoom and it says chat. If you would like to type questions into the chat, you can select the chat button and it will show up for you to type questions in. And then there's also a button at the bottom called React. And if you click React, you'll see a raise hand function. If you are someone who joined by telephone, you can press the *9 buttons and it will raise your hand for you. And then as always, you can email any questions to the policy inbox at hss.dsds.policy@alaska.gov. Okay, turning it back to you, Tony.
Thanks, Jordan. So whenever we address a group, we always like to start out by reminding our audience and ourselves about our mission at Senior and Disability Services to promote the health, well-being, and safety for individuals with disabilities, seniors, and vulnerable adults by facilitating access to quality services and supports that foster independence, personal choice, and dignity. These photos are people who have actually received services from us, and we use their photos with their permission. Next slide. And let's further ground ourselves for the conversation today by making sure we share a common definition for what an environmental modification is. These are services or physical adaptations provided to enable the participant to function with greater independence in the home or when physical adaptations to a residence are necessary to meet the participant's accessibility needs. This language in this first bullet is pretty much straight out of Alaska's waivers on file with the federal government. But I want to note that SDS doesn't support EMODs just through our Medicaid waivers, but through other sources as well, including grant sources that we'll talk about in a minute. The language in these last two bullets is also from our waivers, noting that first, waiver EMODs must be provided by a construction contractor certified by SDS as an environmental modification services provider or a home and community-based waiver services provider that oversees an environmental modification project performed by a contractor licensed by the state. And that second, adaptations may be made to a residence that the recipient owns or to rental property where the recipient resides if the property owner consents, or to the residence of each parent or guardian that has joint custody if the recipient lives with the residents at least part-time. So that's the language from our waivers. And, you know, I want to say, putting that language aside, what I'd like to say is that what EMODs really represent are independence, safety, accessibility in one's very own home, and a way to ensure that one is living a life of their choosing. I think of the modifications we were able to make to my own childhood home and how they made the difference in allowing my father to remain home for the rest of his life, helping him live with dignity right up to close to the very end. And there are significant reason my mother is able to remain there even at the age of 95. And I was reflecting how remarkable it is that sometimes even the simplest piece of hardware can do that. About 20 years ago, I installed a small grab bar along the short set of stairs that enter our house from our garage for my father-in-law to use when he came over. And even though he's since left us, and that grab bar is now rusted over, I think of him whenever I look at it or I use it myself, which I have to say happens more and more often. I know most of you can tell similar stories about what EMODs have meant to people, and I'm really glad you're here with us today. Okay, next slide. I want to speak to a change in the payment structure for EMODs that went into effect this past July. Thanks to strong and effective advocacy in the legislature by stakeholders like the Independent Living Centers and the Governor's Council on Disabilities and Special Education and others. Next slide. This language got placed in the budget bill, HB 268, that states that it is the intent of the legislature that the department raise the $18,500 per project cap for environmental modifications to $40,000 per project, exclusive of shipping costs to remote communities, and extend the project timeline limit from 90 days to 270 days, better reflecting the true cost and time challenges of providing environmental modification services in remote and rural areas of Alaska. SDS is complying with this intent language. Next slide, please, Ellen, thanks. And we're boosting the funding cap to $40,000 as requested and increasing the project timeline. I want to note that the department received no additional funding to increase the cap, but we argued for permission to do it anyway because the access to EMODs through the waivers is at this time low enough that we believe increasing the rate would have an insignificant impact on the overall, $1 billion Medicaid budget. As the second bullet here notes, while we've authorized the new cap through an e-alert, you would have seen it in an e-alert, our regulations have yet to catch up and be revised. And we're going to talk a little bit more about the regulations in a little bit. But until they are revised, the current processes to request an environmental modification remain the same, with the only change being eligibility for the higher funding amount in the extended project timeline. So if you turn to the regulations that are live in the state system now on basis, you will continue to see the old cap. Again, we put out an e-alert on July 1 to note that the new cap would be in effect. And part of the reason we wanted to hold this webinar was to remind folks, again, that the new higher cap is in effect and give it a little more publicity, because we know not everybody is aware. All right. We want to move through our agenda, but I wanted to pause and see if there was a question or two about that legislative intent language at this point, and we can always come back to it later. Jordan or Kara, do you see anything?
Just a reminder again, you can use the React button if you've joined us online on Zoom to raise your hand, or you can type any questions into the chat. And if you don't have any questions yet, that's okay. We have a couple more topics and we will have some more time at the end for questions.
Thanks.
No questions right this second.
I'm sorry, Kara?
No questions yet as of this moment.
So we're going to take a break from talking about EMODs as a Medicaid waiver service and now talk about two programs using non-Medicaid sources to support EMODs for those that can benefit from them. And we'll start with Eric Peterson of our grants unit.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Eric Peterson. I'm the grants unit manager here at SDS. I don't think, oh, good. So we have a few new grants over at SDS. They're not new programs being implemented statewide, though. They're just simply moving over. These are well-established programs that the Department of Health has had for a number of years, but historically they've been managed directly by our financial management services. Due to various concerns or various reasons, they're coming over to SDS for new management, but the nature of the programs are not being changed. And those four programs are assistive technology grants, deferred maintenance for providers, essential program equipment for providers, and home modification upgrades for consumers. And the home modifications one is what we're talking about today. Total of a little over $1 million. Right now, the grants are structured that they're multi-year grants. And so we're coming to the end of our grant cycle, with each grantee having a little over $600,000. There are 3 grantees: Alaska Community Development Corporation, Anchorage Neighborhood Housing Services, and Rural Cap. The primary difference between these EMODs and waiver EMODs is the target population is specifically looking at Alaska Mental Health Trust beneficiaries. This fund started as dollars from the trust, but has transitioned since then to 100% general fund mental health that the trust continues to advocate for. Still, though, the nature and the target population of these dollars is specifically designated for trust beneficiaries. One other difference from waiver EMODs is that the cap for these grants is up to $50,000 per project. We're tentatively planning a new RFP for FY26, and that would go out here next spring to see if there are other grantees, and we could look at strategic changes we can make to the program then. To implement this mod, unlike the waivers, you would start by simply reaching out to the local grantee to coordinate services. So consumers work directly with the 3 grantees that we had mentioned: Alaska Community Development Corp., Anchorage Neighborhood Housing, or Rural Cap, to apply through those agencies. Those agencies would do then the home assessment and begin those modifications. A big portion of this grant is for each agency to have a home assessment team within those agencies to perform a comprehensive assessment of the home and to work with the consumer, identifying what their desires and needs are for accessibility and safety in the home, and then working with those consumers to complete those projects. That's all I've got. It was quick. So if there are questions, I'd love to talk through any of that.
I see one hand up. Marge, do you want to unmute your microphone?
Yeah, hi. This is Marge at AARP. And my question in that last slide that you just showed, Eric, it also said eligibility screening. Can you talk about eligibility, please? Is it just being a trust beneficiary, or is there financial eligibility?
So looking through the RFP, it does not seem that we have financial eligibility baked into it at this point, and we have a needs-based assessment that is loosely defined. And so because we have more applications than funding each year for these grants, I believe they are reviewed in they're reviewed by a committee in a needs-based order. And so I'm not privy exactly to the details yet because they just came over, but I will follow up on that.
There is a question texted in. Can you talk more about the 50,000 cap?
Are there specific questions about that cap?
Just generally, it says, can you talk more about it?
This is Joanna. That was my question.
Yeah.
So does the 50,000 include the agency, the grantees costs as well? Because I don't believe the 50,000 cap is just for the EMOD.
Reading through our RFP, my understanding is that the actual modification to the home is capped at 50,000. It says the projects may not exceed $50,000. And we've got a list of modifications that can be included with that 50,000. And so that would be including the assessment and the actual modifications, but not the overhead costs to the grantee. That's a separate budget in that grant.
Well, I know that both SAIL and ILC are subcontract with the grantees, and the projects that we have worked on in our area are capped at depending on rental or ownership at 20,000. So my assumption is that the balance goes to the grantee. But anyway, if that can be researched a bit more.
Absolutely.
It looks like we do have quite a few questions about sort of the specifics of how these grants are going to work. And I would really appreciate it if people could put them in the chat. I see a bunch of them in there already. We do want to make sure we have time to get through all of the other sections. And it is super helpful for Eric to see the questions that people have about this grant because they are newer to it's a newer grant for SDS to be managing. And Tony, did you have something else you wanted to add?
Yeah, just you nailed it, Jordan. I just wanted to emphasize these are not new grants, as Eric said, but they're new to SDS. They've been managed in a separate division of the Department of Health. They're coming to SDS now, where we're really hoping that we can do a good job of coordinating the needs that people have that may not be eligible for the waiver service, and that there'll be just a better link and better sort of coordination from the grant services to the waiver. We at the Division of Senior Disability Services have just sought and received a position that will be able to be dedicated, working with Eric, to development of this grant program. As Eric said, is this grant period comes to an end and we'll be reissuing new grants in the future. We want to make sure the grant program is as effective as it can be. So that's why we wanted to just put it out in front of you. If you hadn't heard of the program before, hopefully you're a little bit more familiar with it now, and we'll be getting more familiar with it as we incorporate it into our operations. So thank you.
Thanks so much, Tony. I think at this point we are still gonna take questions on this, but we're gonna move some of those questions just to the end to make sure we have time to get through all the planned content here. And I'm seeing really great questions coming in through the chat. So thank you so much for putting those in there. If we want to go ahead and pass to Summer Wheeler, our unit manager for the Provider Certification and Compliance Unit.
Hi,
to talk a
everyone.
little bit about ARPA.
Thanks, Jordan. Hi, everyone. I am Summer Wheeler, the Unit Manager for Provider Certification and Compliance, and I'm super excited about this upcoming opportunity that we have. As most of you recall, Section 9817 of the American Rescue Plan Act has supported a couple of SDS initiatives like the Direct Support Professional Incentive Fund and the Direct Support Professional Certification Program. ARPA funding under this section, 9817, is still available. SDS will use the remainder of this ARPA funding to offer a one-time opportunity for eligible licensed homes to receive up to $75,000 for home modifications or enhancements. This funding opportunity will expire in March 31st of 2026. Next slide, please. Funding will be available to licensed homes certified by SDS to provide group home habilitation, family home habilitation, and residential supported living services, and who are currently serving or intend to serve an individual or individuals with complex needs. A person with complex needs has significant medical, cognitive, or behavioral needs, or a combination of, substantially affecting their ability to function in the community without extensive support. This opportunity is intended to encourage providers to serve individuals with complex needs, but in order to do so would require a modification or enhancement to the home to meet the health and safety of the individual, residents, and staff, and allow the individual to remain in the community. Next slide, please. Funding of up to $75,000 per licensed location will be available to providers who have actively been certified and enrolled since July 1, 2021 to support safety modifications and enhancements. Inactive providers are not eligible for this opportunity. Next slide, please. Some examples of the safety modifications or enhancements include, but this list is not exhaustive of, security and alert systems, enhanced fencing, soundproofing, sensory-related modifications, steel toilets, bolted furniture, lighting fixture modifications, secured wall mounts, enhanced plumbing, high-grade furniture, motion detection technology, plexi or safety glass modifications, soft bathtub, height adjustable changing tables, ceiling lifts and/or tracks, or other modifications as needed to maintain or mitigate health and safety risks for residents with complex needs and staff of the home. Next slide, please. Providers seeking funding must submit a completed application to the ARPA inbox, and we will provide that inbox information on the last slide. The application period will open in early December and remain open until February 15th, 2025. Additional information and application materials will be sent in an upcoming e-alert, so please be on the lookout for it. Next slide, please. The department has approximately $3.6 million to distribute through this fund, depending on the applications received. SDS will consider applications using the following tiered structure until all available funding is distributed. The tiered structure prioritizes homes that would not otherwise have access to EMOD funding and who are currently serving or intending to serve individuals with complex needs. So I'm going to go through the tiers with you all. Tier 1 will prioritize group home habilitation and residential supported living locations currently serving a complex individual or individuals. Tier 2 will be group home habilitation or residential supported living locations that are intending to serve complex individuals. Tier 3 is a child or adult family home habilitation location currently serving a complex individual. Tier 4 is a child or adult family home habilitation location that is intending to serve a complex individual. Please go to the next slide. And then Tier 5 is for, project reimbursement considerations for certified and enrolled providers of group home habilitation, child and/or adult family home habilitation, and residential supported living locations for which expenses were incurred since July 1, 2021, and supporting receipts and evidence will be submitted as part of that application and consideration. SDS will review the submitted applications and projects and bids for eligible providers and make a final determination as to whether a proposed project meets guidelines and can be reimbursed through this ARPA opportunity. Does anybody have any questions for me?
There's a question in the chat. Who does the construction for an ARPA EMOD?
Great question. This will be open. So providers will have the opportunity to go out and seek bids from general contractors in their community.
We have a couple hands up and we have one more question in the chat. Is the ARPA EMOD available statewide?
It is available statewide. Yes.
Great. And then I think, Marge, did you have your hand up first? Can you unmute?
Sorry, no, that's from before. I'll take it down.
Oh, so sorry. Thank you. And then I see Wilcox FCS.
Yeah. So to clarify my understanding for tier 5, you said that we had to have bids from general contractors, but if we're recouping money that was already spent for a project that is on the list from the previous page, how do we are not going to have bids because the work's already paid for?
Correct. So with the application, you'll be able to submit all of the supporting either photographs, receipts, anything project related for our consideration for reimbursement.
Wonderful. And will there be somebody that we can reach out to kind of hold our hand through this process? Because this is a lot of great information, but I also know that it's going to be a lot of ropes to jump through in order to achieve it.
Sure. So we're going to use, we've established the ARPA inbox, as you can see on this last slide right here. That will be monitored regularly by myself and another team member. And we will be available for questions and to assist all providers through this process.
Question in the chat. Must the general contractors be Medicaid providers?
No. They must be licensed, bonded, and insured. But they do not have to be Medicaid certified providers.
Summer, this is Tony. That's right. This is not a Medicaid waiver service that we're talking about. It's not really Medicaid money that is paying for this, although it is related to, it's based on our spending on Medicaid.
We have another question in the chat. Are these funding streams stackable for larger projects?
I'm not sure I fully understand that question.
I think if I'm getting at this correctly, they're thinking is, could you receive the ARPA funding and also one of the home modification grant at the same time? And you also potentially, if it's a waiver recipient, could have access through their Medicaid waiver.
I believe that it can occur that way, yes. I can't speak to the grants. I'll have to defer to Eric on that. But individuals currently residing in family home habilitation locations and eligible to receive EMODs through their waiver would still be eligible to receive an EMOD through the waiver in addition to this funding opportunity.
Right. One thing that's different about this funding opportunity that Summer's describing is we are offering it to the home. It is not necessary that it be linked to a specific individual the way waiver services or the grant program that Eric described is. So that's just a distinction to keep in mind. And Jordan, and Kara, I see Megan, Lynette's question, why can't the same be done for Medicaid waivers? Yes, and Kara, I see that you've answered it, that the waivers come with quite a bit of oversight and expectation from CMS about the way they're going to operate. This funding source doesn't have the same sort of requirements surrounding it.
Okay, do we have any other questions related to the ARPA project before we move on? There will still be, if you're still thinking about sort of what your question is, there's going to be some time at the end also to return to these topics. So, all right, well, here we go. I'm up. Again, hi, I'm Jordan, and we are going to hop into a little stakeholder engagement. Next slide, please. So our EMOD regulations live at 7 AAC 13300, and we also have EMOD conditions of participation that are adopted by reference. That means that in order to make any changes to these, a regulation update would be needed. And so well before any regulation update begins, SDS does what we call stakeholder engagement. And during stakeholder engagement, we are able to speak freely with you about what changes you'd like to see, what changes you would not like to see, what you think is a good idea, what you think is a bad idea. And this is well before we are under development for these regulations. So once we enter formal regulation development, we do have regulatory rules that we must follow, and that those rules kind of limit our ability to discuss regulations that are under development. So this is really our time, besides public comment where we get your feedback on an actual draft, but this is our time to speak very freely with you about what you would like to see for any of those, the particular topics that are in stakeholder engagement. So today, that is EMODs 13300 and also the EMOD conditions of participation. A couple of considerations. We have that intent language Tony introduced us to in the beginning of the webinar. So we are aware that that is going to need to change in the regulations from 18.5 to 40. And then, as many of you are aware, there's also a rate study that is underway, and that may possibly lead to recommended changes in the EMOD reimbursement rate. We're not really sure what that's going to look like yet. Next slide, please. So at this point, I would love to hear from attendees. What can we do here at SDS to make EMOD services more accessible? What are the barriers and successes in the current EMOD service landscape? And what programmatic improvements can SDS make to improve the service? Do you have any ideas for regulation changes that would benefit the program? I think we'd really love to hear from anyone, either in the chat or feel free to raise your hand, again, using that react button, or you can press *9 if you're joining by phone. We kind of have the rest of our time together to either answer questions about some of the other topic areas or really dive into the stakeholder engagement about EMOD regulations and conditions of participation. And I will say, I'm seeing a theme here already in the chat. It looks like we have quite a few folks saying that there are just not enough providers available or no providers available. So you're in good company if you've put that in the chat. And then I see, Lynette, you have your hand up. Are you able to unmute?
Yeah, this is Joanna. I'm disguised as Lynette today.
Oh, apologies. Thank you.
That's all right. It says Lynette by my name. So, to address the lack of Medicaid contractors, the idea of changing the regulation to mirror what is being done with the ARPA funds would be great. We can have a cap of 100,000, but if there's no providers, and as we know, there's only 2 certified Medicaid providers in the entire state, and mostly they're lift providers. So maybe easing up on care coordinators' responsibilities in terms of getting the identifying what the scope of work is. I mean, anyway, Tony, you've heard us talk about this over and over, so I think you get my gist.
Yeah, thanks, Joanna. I want to make sure I caught your comment. You are even despite the raise of the cap to $40,000. I'm hearing you say that's still really not adequate. Is that fair?
That's part of the issue. I mean, and like you said, the rate review might increase that. Separating out the shipping costs was awesome. But again, there are no Medicaid contractors. So easing up and maybe again mirroring what you guys are doing with the ARPA funds to get 3 bids from a licensed bonded contractor would increase the number of contractors, that could do the work.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, as you know, we do have what's called an organized healthcare delivery system arrangement in place in regulation anyway. It's obvious to me that that's not working as it is, because the rate for the administrative provider to do the work of finding the working with the contractors, who themselves don't need to be certified, is still not adequate. So that's work that needs to happen.
Thanks, Tony, and thanks, Joanna. I see we have another hand up, Tiara.
Hi, yeah, I'm calling in from Nome. So I just wanted to say that reading the regulations for the first time today, I didn't know that we could use subcontractors, and reading the chat, it sounds like a lot of people didn't either. We are a certified agency at the health corporation, but we don't have contractors. So I want to pursue that route now. And my question was specifically about the subtracting with a tribal housing authority and the waiver of tribal immunity. I have never seen our health corporation approve that. Have you guys had people waive their sovereign immunity for this service?
For the environmental modification service?
Yeah.
I don't believe so. Summer, are you aware?
Sorry, coming off mute. I'm not aware. I am not aware.
That would be my recommendation for a regulation change to be looked at.
Thanks so much, Tiara.
Yeah. Tiara, thank you for the comment. And Jordan, you say that the administrative fee that's mentioned in the regulation is people are commenting that they were unaware of that, the possibility of administering EMODs.
Yeah, I believe that's what that's about, sort of the OHCDS opportunity there. But as many on this webinar will agree with, this has been an underutilized service for a variety of reasons, and I don't think it's a big surprise that that's sort of a more of a newer concept, even though it's been in our regulations. It's sort of also been underutilized. And then I think we're also speaking to, the requirements in order to subcontract was what Tira was getting at also, which is really, really helpful feedback. And then I'm seeing in the chat, it looks like a question here from Kimberly. Could the requirement for waiver EMODs to be provided by Medicaid providers be lifted? Maybe replace that certification requirement with a training certificate, such as the ADA regulations and related. I think we have at least one thumbs up to that, and a couple other similar sentiments in the chat. Overall, it seems like people are looking for ways to make this a little bit more streamlined. And then we do have another comment that the OHCDS is only paying $100 per project, which is also a barrier. So thank you Thank you for that. And I think, like we mentioned before, there is a rate study underway, and we're eager for the results of that and how that will impact things. But this is really helpful to hear.
Yeah, a comment about the rate study. We talked with the vendor Guidehouse about the work we wanted to see done on environmental modifications and the rate. And, noting that we only have a very few providers certified right now. So they are going to have to do more work than just surveying people. They're going to have to do, compare with what other states are doing. They want to talk with people about why they aren't providing EMODs, what it would take. So it's going to be a little bit of work on their part to gather enough information that they'll be able to have to make a recommendation to us.
Thanks, Tony. I'm also seeing some comments in the chat about how EMODs in rural areas, it's a real problem to achieve any of these rules, and there's quite a cost associated to bring anything there. So caring for how EMODs could work in rural and remote communities would be a suggestion as well. Some very, very helpful comments. Do we have anyone else who would like to speak any of their comments or raise their hand here? Or if you would like to, as always, think a little bit more on this, you can always send us suggestions to the policy inbox, which is hss.dsds.policy@alaska.gov, and we can put that. It's right on the screen, and we can put that in the chat also. And at this point, I think we can open it up to any additional questions we had about either grants or ARPA or stakeholder engagement, the conditions of participation, any of the regulations.
Yeah, I really appreciate people writing down these questions. Some of these clearly might represent a hurdle toward getting past CMS, especially around certification requirements. But we are certainly willing to go to CMS and explore some of these issues with them to see what we're capable of doing. I know that ensuring health and safety remains a concern, as always, with the waivers. Frequently we get questions, well, boy, I could deliver an EMOD so much cheaper if my uncle were able to do the work. That unfortunately seems to be a high hurdle because you don't have the assurance that Uncle Joe is not licensed and bonded and has cleared the hurdles to ensure that he will do quality work. So but we can explore ideas around other certifications or qualifications that might work instead.
Thanks, Tony. I also see a comment in the chat about servicing equipment in rural and remote communities, that even if you can get someone there to do the project, it can be difficult to have someone come back out to do any servicing. And then I see we have a hand up. I first saw it. Is it D Nice?
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Jordan. It would be nice to figure out how we could get the corporations, their maintenance people are usually pretty qualified. They build homes and community buildings and different structures in the villages. Trying to get somebody to come from the lower 48, even here in Anchorage or Fairbanks, to come to the village. Where would they stay? What would they, it's just the cost is astronomical and really not very doable. It's just very, very difficult. The corporations, they send their maintenance people and employees. They know their jobs. They're usually bonded. They usually have insurances. Somehow let's take a look at that avenue. Because for Tierra, myself, and all of us out in the villages, I just don't see how any of this is ever going to work. I mean, it just does not look like a pathway any of us are ever going to have available to us the way it sets. Thank you.
Thanks, Denise. Have you spoken with those entities about becoming certified in providing e-modification waiver services?
Well, yeah,
And
I talked to a couple of them about it, and they basically said they don't even know where to begin to even try to do something like that. That was just so far out of their wheelhouse. When the corporation gets money and it's time to build or structure, they go do it. They handle it. And I mean, it's not like the new housing that they're putting up is substandard out in the villages. You've seen it. It's great stuff. It's great work. They know what they're doing. Maybe that's part of what we need to do, Tony. Maybe we need to figure out how to make a path for these people. Because right there, maybe that's the answer. They say, I have no idea how to even do something like that. Maybe that's part of the problem. I don't even know how to tell them to go do something like that. So for me to say, well, shoot, I'm sorry, I don't know. Who do we call? Who do we talk to? What's the path? What do you have to do? Who do you got to know? And if it's too difficult, that's just silly. Because let's just shoot ourselves in the foot every time. Every time we turn around, that's what we're doing. So maybe that's part of this answer. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I'd be interested to hear from Tiara, and if anybody from Manilic, for instance, is on to hear if I know they have, senior and disability services divisions in their health corporations, if they've broached the subject with their administrators and the response they've gotten. I'd really be interested to hear that.
Yeah, our maintenance men are not authorized to even do grab bar installations. We've tried that route. I do know that they do them in Manilic and Kotzebue. So there should be kind of a conversation that encourages our health corporation to, kind of step up there and take on that very basic help. But we have talked about subcontracting, and I think that they would be totally in favor of subcontracting. Our agency, Norton Sound Health Corporation, is an EMOD provider, so if we can subcontract with the housing authority or with another authority, I think that they would be in support of that. And we've been looking at ramp grants for a long time. Denise installs all of them for our region, which is amazing, through her grants as the independent living provider. But yeah, we want it out here. So.
Definitely. Yeah, because the reality is it's kind of silly, Tiara, that they have to call me to have the grab bars installed, even just to put grab bars around the toilet. I mean, it's really kind of silly. They get them, I go get them from them, I get them installed. It's like, what are we doing? What are we doing? Makes no sense.
Thank you. I see two hands up. I think I saw Kim first, and then I have Paula. I see your hands up in your box. So we'll go to Kim and then we'll go to Paula.
Hi, I'm not an expert in this, but one thing just over the years that over and over and over has been clear is there's no incentive for a contractor to become certified. And so it just seems like we should think about leaning into the organized healthcare delivery system model. I think it even speaks to what Joan commented in the chat as well. I know care coordinators struggle with putting together a very technical scope of work. So if an organized healthcare delivery system could be compensated to develop those relationships with contractors. It could be a tribal health entity, right? I mean, if we could work through the sovereignty issue or other providers in the region that would take this on and develop some expertise in developing those scopes of work and making it really easy for certified contractors. I guess my input would be, do we even want to try to make certification easy for a contractor? Like, why? There's demand, there's not enough. Why are we even going that route? It seems like it needs to be a structure that facilitates the process and can easily engage with contractors, but that we don't expect contractors to become certified providers. That is just my kind of outside input, and I'd be curious what other people who have more experience in this think about that route.
Thanks, Kim.
Paula.
So speaking as a small business in the contracting trade, the whole process with trying to become an EMOD provider is challenging. It is not in our wheelhouse. It is not what we do. We swing hammers, we operate welders. I think it's unreasonable to expect that small businesses who they're not part of the Medicaid realm, they're not part of the healthcare system. We are builders, and it is very challenging. We've tried. We've looked at it. We've not been able to make sense of it. And I'm someone who's somewhat familiar with the Medicaid waiver system as a former care coordinator. So that's my perspective.
Thank you so much for sharing that. So I'm hearing a lot of comments that are asking for a little bit easier path to become a EMOD provider, potentially making it a more obvious path for how you would subcontract. So perhaps the contractors aren't needing to be certified Medicaid providers, perhaps by utilizing the organized healthcare delivery system more effectively. We're having some great comments in the chat too. I'm seeing a lot of them in that line. And we have a suggestion in the chat that it might be a good idea to survey some of the EMOD providers who have provided services in the last few years to see what their experiences have been like. We have a request for more resources around how to be an EMOD provider, how to go about performing an environmental modification, what all goes with that. And then comment here about incentivizing modular ramps that can be reused might be an idea as well. And we have a question here. Is the requirement to be a Medicaid provider a state rule or a CMS rule? And all the providers of home communities waiver services are certified. But as many mentioned, we do have the ability to have the organized healthcare delivery system, and that is something that we are also revisiting as a division to see if there's any other ways to leverage that to make this a little bit less burdensome.
And Jordan, I see Joan's comment about care coordination there, and that's certainly something that I have heard, that working with EMODs requires a lot of care coordinators. Challenges of not having enough contractors means that's a lot of footwork, and that there's questions that some care coordinators have about, is that really in keeping with the other expectations around what a care coordinator has? And does it really match, the expertise they have about other kinds of services? They're not obviously experts in construction, and so recognize that, Joan. And I'd be interested to hear from care coordinators about their experience trying to get EMODs for their clients.
We are still seeing some great comments in the chats. Does anyone else want to raise their hand and share any of their comments, speak any of their comments, either on this topic or on any of the other fun and exciting EMOD topics we've covered today?
I'll add, I'm reading Stacy's comment now about our agency was an EMOD provider for a while, no manual, just sort of the challenges of casting about trying to understand what they needed to do and how. That's one reason I'm excited that we are going to have an individual coming on board the division who is going to make EMODs their sort of area of specialty, and particularly to help us develop the grant programs, but also we're hoping that there'll be a real resource for our waiver services as well, and be able to develop more information, more guidance for people. Will help develop regs that are more user-friendly, easier to access EMODs. So thanks, Stacy, for that comment.
Okay, thank you. I see a hand up, Wilcox.
Can you hear me? Great. I'd like to go back to the AARPA reimbursement for group homes. That's something I'm very interested in. Is there documentation you could shoot me today, or a link you could give me where I can kind of take a look at what's necessary to file for this so I can start gathering information for the December opening?
For the ARPA funding?
Yes, I'm sorry if I said it wrong.
No, you're totally fine. Just making sure I want to make sure I'm the right topic.
This is for the group home because I have done hundreds of thousands of dollars of remodels in our group homes over the last 3 or 4 years, and this could really benefit our agency and the individuals that we support.
Yes. So here's what I can tell you. And Summer, phone a friend, help me out if I'm saying anything wrong. We are going to be opening the application and sending that out. You should see an alert on that December 1st. As for what can happen now, Summer slides, I will say, had pretty good info in them about sort of the lay of the land for this project. And we are able to get those slides out today. If you would like, just pop your email in the chat and we can get you a copy of the slides for this. So no problem. And you can send that direct to me if you don't want to put it in the chat for everyone.
No, it's out there. Everybody can have it. Call me anytime.
Okay. We will go ahead and get you a copy of the slides, and anyone else who would like one, no problem. And that has sort of the broad strokes of how the funding opportunity is going to work. And then you should see more robust information coming out on the 1st.
I do have like more detailed questions. So if we moved an ALH license from one location to another, and that location wasn't necessarily up and running in 2021, but it was the license that moved, would that home qualify for the reimbursement for this opportunity? Because the license existed. Do you understand what I'm saying?
I do. This is Summer.
Okay.
I do. And I actually, would you mind sending that to the ARPA inbox? I think that's a great question. And one that probably needs a little further internal discussion. But I would like to start collecting questions like that. So I'm going to put the inbox in the chat for you. Okay.
Okay. And then is there a cap because I think I have done $50,000 plus remodels on no less than 5 of our licensed homes that are specific to individual needs and like making it a better environment that meet the list that you guys provided. So is there a cap on the number of homes that you can get reimbursement for?
So we're going to have and I hope I'm okay to say this, but we are going to have an open application period. One open application period for the length of time described in the PowerPoints. And so we're really going to take a look at all of the applications submitted and make it equitable across the state. And so we're going to take a look at the total funding amount that we have and really prioritize based on that tiered system. So we haven't identified a cap per se, but we want to make sure that we are encouraging providers all across the state to take advantage of this opportunity.
Okay, and you said that the state funding for this was $3.5 million?
The ARPA funding is $3.6 million.
3.6, and then it was $75,000 per licensed home.
Correct.
Wonderful. Thank you. I look forward to the PowerPoint and you guys being patient with all of my questions.
No, they're great. Great questions. Thank you.
I'm seeing a bunch of emails in the chat. Fun. We'll make sure to get these slides out to everyone. It looks like some of our questions have slowed down a little bit. So we do have 90 minutes scheduled for today, but that doesn't mean we have to use it. We could always look forward to more of your questions in any of either the policy inbox or the ARPA inbox. Unless other folks have questions they'd like to either speak or put in the chat today for us to address, we would be happy to give you a little time back.
There were a few grant specific questions that I wanted to circle back to, make sure we covered.
Great, Eric, I turn it over to you. Thank you for going.
One of the questions that we saw in the chat was, does each grantee have to have their own people to provide work? And I looked through our grant agreements. Grantees have to have a home assessment team, but it looks like there are some partnerships being developed there as well from what Joanna described. But for the actual work of upgrades, no. Grantees are using licensed contractors to make the upgrades. So not grantees directly. Does that answer that question about those staff? There was a question about the breakdown of costs. The budget categories fall into 3 categories for projects: general construction expense, personal services, and home assessment tool expense. There's no breakout specifically for shipping or labor versus supplies. So labor, supplies, and shipping are all bundled in that general construction expense budget category. And then there was a little bit of confusion about NeighborWorks. The Alaska Neighborhood Corporation is doing business as NeighborWorks. And so NeighborWorks is one of the 3 grantees that we listed in that PowerPoint. And that's all the questions that I saw, unless there are more.
Thanks so much, Eric. Appreciate it. I think at this time we're kind of doing a last call for questions. So I'm searching the crowd to see if there's any hands up, if I'm missing anything. Otherwise, we will go ahead and give you a part of your lunch hour back. And
Jordan, if I may, I just really want to thank everybody for the honesty and candor. I like I said at the start of the webinar, this has been something that very soon upon my arrival here at SDS, I heard not only from providers, but people internal to SDS, that this is something we really need to work on. And it's always hard for us to hear that something is not working as well as people would like, but we need to be open to that and be accountable to you. So just wanted to say thank you for the honesty and the candor, and please continue the dialogue. As Jordan said, we are in this period where we haven't launched into rewriting regs yet, but we can speak freely with you and look forward to continuing to do so. So thanks everybody.
thanks all. Have a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.